Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. Today is Wednesday the 31st of August 2022. We are live, we are interactive, and in tonight's programme we'll be talking about the World Economic Forum's Great Reset and how this is really moving into action as we see that their policies are bringing devastation to nations. They are destroying freedoms and innovation around the world. And back at the end of July, they came out with a policy announcement that they recommended that we should all end ownership of our cars and that we would be happy earning nothing. Also, the World Economic Forum is behind, or believed to be behind, the government's insane policy of pursuing zero carbon emissions, which is causing a huge energy price rise that we're all going to face come October. And we'll be asking, what role does the World Economic Forum's Great Reset play in Bible prophecy? Reagan, it's good to have you back on this program after what seems now a month, 4 weeks. And of course, it's our live program for 3 weeks. Yeah. 2 years ago this week was our first ever Behind the Headlines. We discussed the Great Reset then and the World Economic Forum. And for our viewers as well, it's your birthday tomorrow. So happy birthday for tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Time flies when you're having fun. On Behind the Headlines, guys, we have so many topics that we deal with that are, I think it's fair to say, Simon, far from fun. But at the same time, I think there's a measure of truth to it that when you have Christ in your life and when you are focused on looking at these inarguably catastrophic world events and situations through the lens of our Christian hope, we can, as James calls us to, have joy regardless of the circumstance because we're looking beyond this. So the past 2 years have been a real privilege, and I am very glad that after this past month break we're back live and interactive. So I'm expecting to hear some very good sage thoughts from each of our viewers this evening. Please send them in. You're exactly right, Simon. 2 years ago we talked about the World Economic Forum, and it does feel like over the past couple of years there have been many times that we've discussed a topic kind of in a preliminary stage of importance where we've said, yeah, this is one to watch out for, and then we come back to it a year, and now in this case 2 years later, and say, okay, this is really ramping up. What we're talking about here is the erosion of civil liberties, basic fundamental human rights. And while, yes, there are some people, I hear some people say, well, as Christians, we have to be willing sometimes to lay our rights aside and down. Fair enough. If you're talking about being willing to suffer for the cause of Christ, absolutely. That doesn't mean that you don't speak out against the injustices that are rife and that are being actively promoted, acting as if they aren't happening. The World Economic Forum, its policies are wreaking havoc, and to sit idly by and to not address this in some way would be failing to show care for our neighbours, which Jesus calls us to.
And our nation, of course. And of course, we see that the World Economic Forum's Great Reset is fully being operated now 2 years on. We see that back at the end of July, as I mentioned earlier, the World Economic Forum announced their plan to end private ownership of our cars by saying they're looking to reduce global reliance on critical metals and help nations make the transition to renewable energy supplies. The World Economic Forum and the globalists want to destroy our freedoms, our wealth, and stop our great Western nations from innovating. And they also believe that in the future we'll all be happy owning nothing. The article that I based the program on, according to J B Shurk, writing for the Gatestone Institute, states that the World Economic Forum's push for a centrally controlled economic system will crush rights, stifle creativity, and produce poverty and servitude. They're also using a combination of pandemic, famine, and fear to centralise power and dominance for themselves. and they are pushing us towards a scary dystopian society. We see that Britain and energy price crisis is directly caused by the World Economic Forum's promotion and push for nations to pursue a net zero energy emissions policy that's threatening our nation with financial ruin. We see that our further liberties will be eroded when we see the introduction of a digital currency, maybe in less than 5 years' time. And we'll also be asking this programme, how does the Great Reset fit into Bible prophecy?
So when it comes to this Great Reset, the idea is that traditional capitalism is redundant, it's outdated, it needs to be scrapped. We need to adopt more socialist policies. We need to essentially adopt the very policies that in the past century has proven in society after society have failed. But the manner in which these policies are being pushed is not through simply gaining political power as has been in the past. It is in many ways through a engineered coercive action. Which is why I think when it comes to the energy crisis that we're dealing with, the manufactured engineered energy crisis that none of us can do anything about because we've become very subservient to the status quo. We have gas suppliers, we have electric suppliers. We are in a society where self-sustaining sufficiency in terms of sourcing these things, it's gone out the window long past. Because we're subservient to these institutions, now it's very, very easy for various powers to enforce what they desire. How do they do that? Well, first of all, it makes sense logically by crippling us as a society, by at least invoking a measure of fear, stoking up fear among the general populace, so that then various extreme policies can be introduced that are presented as the savior. They're presented as what we need in order to thrive, what we need in order to stay and be healthy. So crisis presented, fear stoked up, everything engineered in such a way that the common populace are desperate just to survive, just to have some help. And so we'll agree to, sadly, almost anything.
And that's where we're heading. And that's a great danger. So just as this programme, let's reset for 2 years ago. And when we recorded this programme on the 2nd of September 2020, we did a programme on the World Economic Forum, and we discussed how in June 2020, the World Economic Forum hosted a conference with some of the planet's most powerful business leaders, government officials and activists announced a proposal to reset the global economy. Instead of traditional capitalism, the high-profile group said that the world should adopt more socialistic policies such as wealth taxes, additional regulation and a massive Green Deal like government programs, and that is fully being implemented. They say that every country from the United States to China must participate, and every industry from oil and gas to tech must be transformed, wrote Klaus Schwab, who is the president of the World Economic Forum, the founder and executive chairman. He said in an article published on their website, in short, we need a great reset of capitalism. He also said that all aspects of our society and economy must be revamped, from education to social contracts to working conditions, with the support of Prince Charles, our future king, and also the chief economist of the World International Monetary Fund, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, CEO of and presidents of major international corporations such as Microsoft and BP, to name others. So, yeah, whether it's media leaders, whether it's our own governments, whether it's our own companies, everyone's on board with this.
Are you a conspiracy theorist, Simon?
Not at all.
No, so some people are saying, if you mention Great Reset, which there's an abundance of open access resources that show this is a thing, if you mention the World Economic Forum, if you mention Klaus Schwab, immediately it's, oh, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, or I don't get into conspiracy. Well, we're not conspiracy theorists. We're not. And this is a video report by our good friends at CBN indicating and showing that the WEF and the Great Reset is not a conspiracy theory.
People at the World Economic Forum get their way. They say you'll own nothing and be happy about it. Energy will be green, rationed, and expensive, and travel will be restricted. Even your diet will be controlled, and currency will be digital. This left-wing dystopian dream is called the Great Reset, and you're supposed to be excited about it. The Great Reset has been labeled a conspiracy theory, and even sounds like a conspiracy theory. But everything we know about it comes from the global elites themselves, who have been quite open about it.
This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a well-documented movement among many of the world's most powerful people.
Justin Haskins is a leading authority on the Great Reset.
Fundamentally, this is a radical and complete transformation of everything that we do in our society to control people's behaviors, to control businesses, and to move society in the direction that you want to move it. It will change the way businesses are evaluated. It'll coerce businesses to pursue left-wing causes.
The Great Reset was unveiled at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, where many of the world's most powerful people go to offer solutions to the world's problems. And the World Economic Forum sees the coronavirus pandemic as a historic opportunity to change the way the world operates.
Right now, we're facing a crisis of international proportion. It's going to have long-term impact for us.
Their solution is essentially global socialism. Think of the Green New Deal combined with the COVID-19 lockdown restrictions, and throw in something called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, in which technology is supposed to radically change the way we live and work. Klaus Schwab is the founder of the World Economic Forum.
What the Fourth Industrial Revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities.
It has the support not only of world leaders, but of global corporations like MasterCard and BP, brought to you by people who think they know what's best for you.
By giving, the elites, the technocrats in society, the most educated people, the ability to manipulate society, pull the levers in society, and manage and manipulate society so that it's, in their minds, perfect.
But a Trump re-election would blow a massive hole in the Great Reset. 1 week before the election, Italian Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano wrote an open letter to the president, warning him that the Great Reset is inhuman, faceless tyranny that seeks to subdue all of humanity, and that President Trump and the United States are the wall against the deep state, the final assault of the children of darkness.
Over the past 4 years, Donald Trump has been the single greatest roadblock for people who are pushing this internationalist, globalist sort of agenda.
The elites at Davos are now counting on a Biden victory for their Great Reset to go forward. The World Economic Forum and the Biden campaign even share the same slogan, Build Back Better.
To build back better.
It's also a phrase you've heard being used by Justin Trudeau, by the Pope, by the Prince of Wales, and by leaders around the world.
English journalist and author James Delingpole.
You'd be amazed by how many world leaders are on board with this globalist plan, even people that claim to be conservative. This is worse than Nazism. This is worse than communism. This is worse than fascism. These guys are planning on taking over the whole world.
We'll hear more about the Great Reset when the World Economic Forum meets again in January. And whether he's in the White House or not, Donald Trump is expected to be a force, which could remain a problem for the hopeful backers of the Great Reset. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Now, what's very interesting about that video is that it is over 2 years old. And so, of course, we know that Donald Trump was not re-elected to the presidency as he was looking at the impact that might have on this. We also can see how things have developed in that time. We're asked by one person anonymously, most ordinary Christians don't know that the WEF exists, let alone what it is and what it does. We also do not know, which is why we're having a program on it. And while we had a program on it 2 years ago, 2nd September of 2020, you can find that still on YouTube and on the Revelation TV website. But Anita, she highlights a couple of practical ways in which this plays out. She says, it's lovely to have you both back live. I hope you both had a lovely break. Thank you for all the pre-recorded programs you did. Greatly appreciated. Happy birthday for tomorrow, Reagan. Thank you, Anita. We are already seeing more hybrid and electric cars appearing, and cash is clearly being phased out. This reset is almost certainly a move towards the one world order and the biblical end times. The energy crisis is serious enough, and rising food prices. It's going to be a struggle for so many. It's true about diet too. We have the sugar tax, and all sugary foods and drinks are being phased out. We're seeing more and more vegan products too. Scripture 1 John 5:4, for everyone born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. Blessings and love from Anita and Mary. Thank you both. I mean, Simon, we are seeing a lot of changes that are essentially out of our hands. We can't really do much ourselves about the cash situation. I went with my wife to a coffee shop yesterday, and we had cash. We were going to pay with cash. Oh, they didn't take cash. Okay, so you can't really do anything about that. You go to shop and you want to buy something, a sweet treat or whatever, sweet treats. They're now increasingly moving everything that's sugary or sweet to the very back of the shop. And there are fines imposed on shops if they have various products at the very front, because they're wanting to discourage people from that. Now, I'm all for having a healthy lifestyle, but I do think that you need to have individuals allowed to have responsibility and choice.
So what about the issue, which is tonight's question? Would you be happy with the World Economic Forum's proposal to give up your ownership of your car or your house? Because back in July, the World Economic Forum is saying it's looking to reduce global reliance on critical metals, such as nations look to make the transition to renewable energy supplies. And one proposal is reducing the ownership of private vehicles. Another says that the transition from fossil fuels to renewables will need large supplies of critical metals such as complement, lithium, nickel, to name a few, the forum said in a report earlier this month. This is according to Fox Business News. Shortages of these critical materials could rise in the cost of clean energy technologies. Not that they're working anyway. The international lobbying organisation based in Switzerland has proposed 3 solutions for lowering the cost of critical metals used in everything from cell phones, mobile phones, and electric vehicles to wind turbines and efficient lighting. So they're even looking to actually take our cars off us as well.
Are you willing to give up ownership of your car or home? It's our question this evening. Please let us know. I think the answer is, by and large, probably going to be no, but the valid point that we're asked, we also have no idea on how to challenge and or stop them in the natural, at least. What happens when these things are enforced? At what point do things reach a critical level? Because we were talking a little bit before the program, there's a very real concern that this is just cultivating and creating an environment that gives way to anarchy, absence of law and order, and revolution. Revolution, and not healthy revolution.
No, of course. I mean, the thing is, what they're concerned about the most is the middle classes. That they want to completely wipe out the middle classes. They want the elites at the top and everyone else down on the bottom so they can control. And the fact is that we have seen the kind of destruction of Sri Lanka over the past few months. There's been a revolution there, and the president of Sri Lanka is gone because they were to be the first nation to use organic farming in Sri Lanka, which massively increased the price of food. They couldn't produce enough production and has brought collapse. And this is the World Economic Forum's idea and concept that they adopted, and they thought that this would make Sri Lanka rich and prosperous. It didn't, it just brought complete anarchy and total economic devastation. There's similar things happening in the Netherlands. If we got time, we'll go to that CBN News report. And also Britain now is facing the same situation, that because of this energy crisis that we're facing and the cost of living, not because of what Boris Johnson is telling us, because of Russia's invasion of the Ukraine is pushing energy prices up so much. It's more because we're pursuing a zero carbon emissions policy that is destroying our nation. We are destroying our natural energy production to the extent that in 2023, it's only a few months away, our energy costs per household could raise to over £7,000 a year. In October, they'll raise to around 3,000. So this means potentially 500,000 people in the hospitality industry losing their jobs, then hundreds of thousands linked to the hospitality and the supply industries that supply the hospitality industry being out of work, massive unemployment, poverty and the states that we haven't even seen on this scale before. And there's real danger because we are pursuing policies that in the natural are absolutely insane if there wasn't such an agenda to do it. So it's either naivety on behalf of our government or they are following the orders of someone else.
Now, we've been leading up to this point. You don't just arrive at this enforcement of policies overnight. And one of the questions we have from Tracy has to do with the impact and influence of the pandemic in this. Tracy says, it's great to see Behind the Headlines live again. I've learned so much from this program over the years. I'm interested to hear your take on the COVID pass. And the question essentially is built on this belief that the COVID situation, the whole of the pandemic and various mandates and requirements is a dress rehearsal of sort for this great reason.
Digital ID. We've done a program on this one as well. So Tracy, great that you've been watching this program, learning from this program. I think back on, we have done a program on this one on the digital ID, and it's all linked to that. This is all part of their plan. It's all part of the digital, heading towards a digital currency in probably about 5 years' time, linked to a digital ID, linked to a social credit system, and it's all about control. So it's extraordinary, even though we have political leaders in place that we elect, they are not governing in the interests of the British people and what's best for the nation, because any government looking at bringing in these zero carbon emissions policies would have known the total economic devastation caused by implementing these policies.
Well, let's just consider some of that economic devastation. You brought this in from the Sunday Times.
Giving away my politics today for tomorrow, but I'll let you off. Carry on.
Okay, so watch Politics Today for the in-depth on it. But 500,000 jobs at risk in hospitality, 10,000 hospitality businesses facing closure, 100 billion pounds is being sought by suppliers to help households, 1,500% increase in energy bills for some farmers. And I'm sure, Simon, this is just fairly localized. This is, I'm sure, the UK.
Worse in Europe.
Yeah, so it doesn't even scratch the surface of what's going on around the whole of the world. Now, Kevin says it's obvious what's going on. The system of the past has been closed down. It's all about control of the people. I'm so blessed to know Jesus and trust in His ways. I see much fear in people now. That's the one thing that you and I are not wanting to convey here. These are serious times that call for a serious response and awareness as to what is going on. But the response that you and I should have as believers is not one of fear at all. We are a people not of fear, but we have a spirit not of fear, but a power of love and of a sound mind, which is why we're hoping that this communication will help provide that sound.
And we need to be watchmen.
Absolutely.
You know, we need to, you know, we're in a position of great responsibility where it's important that where we see society head in the direction it's going in, to act as a warning so that we know in advance and that we can prepare ourselves both spiritually and also practically for the days that are coming.
Kev says, I tell these people how important it is to be right with God, in time. There's going to be a big kickback against what's coming down the road very soon. Thanks for telling the truth in Jesus, lads. No fear here. Just trust Jesus. Amen to that. Jay says, hi guys, good to have you back. Reagan sweets and chocolates were moved away from checkouts a long time ago after much campaigning by mothers trying to get through checkouts with children who were tired, fed up, etc., which is, I'm sure, the case. I was speaking more of the other stuff that has to be moved toward the back, and things like meat, which increasingly the prices you see are going up, and they're rearranging it so that you have the vegan options first. It used to be a nightmare putting shopping through the checkout with kids. Now it's much better, but I agree with everything you're saying. And Jay, I am very thankful as a father of a very rambunctious toddler now that they did change that. It's difficult enough going shopping as it is, so I'm with you there. Again, Anita says, I won't give up ownership. With all the price rises though, will they make it impossible for most people to afford to own a car or home? Some people may have to resort to equity release to pay bills and could lose their homes that way. Well, in relation to the cities, it's already almost impossible to own a home, and increasingly it's a bit senseless to own a car, at least in London. It's in the center of London. The taxation and the fines and the rates just make it economically unfeasible and unwise. But the question is, Anita, I suppose, what happens if they seize that ownership? Because that's kind of what we're talking about.
Well, if you look at the policy a moment, there was one of the news headlines, I think it was the Times on Monday, the front page of the Times, talking about how 1/3 of Conservative voters who are voting to determine who will be our next Prime Minister want state ownership of the utility companies. And of course, this is the part of the plan. You centralise everything, you nationalise everything, so it's going in that direction. And sooner or later, when we can't afford our mortgages, the government said, look, we'll take your houses off you, you pay us rent. So then that's another form of control that we're heading down. And then, of course, cars would go in the same direction. Of course, then if there's an energy crisis and stuff as well, people are already beginning to think, how am I going to save money? I mean, people are now talking about not putting the heating on during the winter because the energy bills are going to be so much. Not limiting the amount of electricity they use because the cost will be so high. These are kind of drastic measures, and it's all because of these insane policies that our government is pursuing that are crippling our economy and our way of life. And the government should have had the decency to tell us, to say, yeah, we'll sign up to these UN climate accords, but we need to give the people a voice first. You can follow, do you want to use these renewable energies and get rid of the more traditional forms of fossil fuel energies, but it will mean a massive cost in living and everything else. So, yeah, it's one of the legacies left by Boris. Do you want to quickly go through, and anyone who wanting to learn more about this topic, there's a brilliant article by J B Shurk called The Great Reset, a blueprint for destroying freedom, innovation and prosperity. And that's written by the Gatestone Institute. I managed to get some of the extracts. Do you want to read some of the extract from his excellent article that is the foundation for this program? So regarding the green agenda, for instance, which you were just touching on, although the WEF and its sister organizations claim to be saving the planet, their efforts seem primarily an ignoble design to control the planet. Clean energy, after all, is controlled energy, and the more that energy is controlled by centralized governments, the more completely, once free, markets become centrally controlled. He then goes on to walk through some of the consequences of this regarding whole nations. Notice that the World Economic Forum, to succeed in its mission to control all human activity, it must first destroy the sovereignty of nation states. Why? Because, as noted above, liberal nations that embrace freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and free market entrepreneurship foster innovation and great wealth.
Any nation not encumbered by the WEF's market prescriptions will most likely continue to prosper, while those shackled to the Great Reset will most likely languish, which is why Western politicians are pushing so hard to gather this Build Back Better proposal, irrespective of the wishes of any nation's voting citizens. It's also why we're seeing the influence economically and power and wealth being transferred more from the West to the global South. So we're seeing a lot in Asia and the global South in regard to that transfer of wealth, because many of these nations have their systems which are completely against what's going on or ignoring what's going on. They're unaffected by what's happening, though they may very well be influencing it from the outside in some way. China, for instance. They've called for the end of private ownership of cars. We've already talked a little bit about that, but Simon, there's another, and you mentioned this a little bit ago, another reality that this energy crisis that we're experiencing is a direct result of the net zero policy that we are pursuing to be in line with the WEF's green agenda and all that, to have a net zero carbon output by 2050.
And also, I mean, regarding that as well, I mean, it doesn't even make scientific sense. There was a great article by Melanie Phillips about 1,000 scientists have got together and said that, that there is nothing humanly we can do to stop the rise in temperatures. It's just the climate going through a different period where everything's heating up, and there's no evidence to suggest that this is actually man-made. So even the science is questionable. Now, earlier today, I had an interview with Dale Hurd, the senior editor and news correspondent for CBN, and this is his take on the World Economic Forum's Great Reset. We're now joined on Behind the Headlines with Dale Hurd, who's a senior news correspondent for CBN. Dale, it's always good to have you on Behind the Headlines.
Good to be back. Thanks.
Pleasure. And Dale, you've done so many groundbreaking stories exposing the true agenda of the World Economic Forum. Can you share with us one of the stories that the World Economic Forum took an image from one of the reports that you did on them? Tell us the story behind it.
Yeah, I was contacted by an author who's writing a book about the Great Reset in the World Economic Forum, and he asked, did you know that they're using part of your story in one of their YouTube videos? And it was one of these videos to reassure people that there's nothing to worry about, and they were using my story as an example of needless worry. So yeah, I did one of the early stories, and I think it was actually entitled Not a Conspiracy Theory, because it sounded like a conspiracy theory, and I used their own words. It was just, I was astounded at the things they wanted to do. And it's the things that everyone knows about now. You know, they don't want us to own anything. They want to get rid of cars. They want us to eat bugs and not meat. They think there are too many people on the planet.
And Dale, you explained a little bit about what the World Economic Forum's agenda is, particularly in the global reset. But for our viewers that may have come across this for the first time, who would you say that the World Economic Forum are, and what is the Great Reset that they are slowly or rapidly actually beginning to implement in our time?
Well, I'll tell your viewers, they are people who think they know more than you do. And they think that you need to be told what to do, and they think that life on this planet needs to be reorganized. And if you look at it point by point, it's a refutation. It's a reversal of the Genesis mandate for man. It's very important that in Genesis, God brought the animals to Adam and had him name them. This indicates man's dominion over nature. And many environmentalists, and certainly the World Economic Forum, they reject this. They view man as an antibody on the planet that's just a troublemaker, and that there are way too many people. By the way, when I travel through England, sometimes I hear people talk about overpopulation. I think that's a concern with some people there. But God did say, be fruitful and multiply. He didn't say, be careful how many kids you have. But the World Economic Forum believes there are way too many humans. The number they think is optimal is shocking. It's so low. And so they want to reshape the way we live to reach their objective.
And also, who are the World Economic Forum? So,
Sure.
I mean, their ideology is that they're globalist, they're global elites, aren't they? But can you kind of name some of those that are household names that have been groomed, for example, by the Economic Forum and are currently today's world leaders in the West?
Sure. Well, it was the leader is Klaus Schwab, and he has brought in virtually every world leader, including names you wouldn't think of. I think Vladimir Putin was given an award by the World Economic Forum. Where I live in Virginia, in the United States, our governor, who is a Christian, he went to the World Economic Forum. This has been it's a very alluring place for world leaders, and they've gone there to be wined and dined. And I would say virtually, well, most world leaders have at some point visited the World Economic Forum and taken part in what's going on there.
And Dale, what would you make of the story that the World Economic Forum back in July announced their plans to end private ownership of our cars by saying that they are looking to reduce global reliance on critical metals and help nations make the transition to renewable energy supplies? What do you make of this policy recommendation? If implemented, would be extremely unpopular with the electorate because no one wants their cars taken away.
Right. And even the move to electric vehicles, the batteries are so expensive to replace, it makes the whole idea cost prohibitive. But yeah, they want to take your choice away from you. They want to control how you live. I've lived in apartments, and I might live in an apartment again someday, but I think God's idea was for men to own land. I think Satan hates land ownership. And it's interesting that the World Economic Forum does too, except when they own it. And that's another thing. I mean, these rules don't apply to them. But as for us, they want us in apartment blocks. They want us using public transportation. They want us eating insects. And I'm just watching to see how much of this the people of the world will take. Because what usually happens in history is the people that are oppressed suddenly realize there's a lot more of them than the people in government. And good people have minded their own business for a long time in Britain and America. And it's time for that to stop. They need to get involved and realize that they can change this stuff. They don't have to go quietly into the night into a dystopian future.
And Dale, why do the World Economic Forum and the globalists want to destroy our freedoms, our wealth, stop our great nations such as Britain, the United States from being nations of great innovation? And why do they think that we'll all be happy earning nothing? Or owning nothing, I should say.
That's a really tough question to answer, because the only answer I can come up with is they are completely disconnected from reality. They are very wealthy people, and they either do not care at all about the rest of the planet, or they somehow think these are good ideas. As you said, this is a recipe for disaster. Solar and wind cannot meet the demand necessary for our energy needs. Do I wish solar and wind worked? Yes, but it doesn't, and it's very expensive. And this winter is going to be a rude wake-up call for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Dale, according to a writer called J B Shurk, who's writing for the Gatestone Institute, he states that the World Economic Forum's push for a centrally controlled economic system will crush rights, stifle creativity, and produce poverty and servitude. They say they are using a combination of pandemic, famine, and fear to centralize power and dominance for themselves. Are they pushing us towards a dangerous dystopian society in which they control everything?
Yes, but I think, of course, well, some people think that it was a plandemic, that it was planned, and I won't get into that. But either way, they are certainly using the pandemic. They saw that as an opportunity for the Great Reset to start over. And yeah, I mean, so I want to put people to sleep, but the Congress in Vienna in 1815, where the dynastic empires of Europe gathered to, among other things, keep democracy down. It was spreading through Europe after the American Revolution. And this eventually led to the revolution in Europe of 1848. In other words, and a lot of it had to do with policies that left people starving. Food was a factor in the French Revolution. These policies, if allowed to go forward, the fruit they're going to bear is going to be a lot of human suffering, and then, predictably, I think revolution against governments. We see what happened in Sri Lanka, which was held up as a model for the rest of the world when they went to organic farming. Well, the leaders ended up fleeing the nation, and one of the prime minister had his house burned down.
And also, you mentioned this situation as well in the Netherlands as well, by changing, moving away from kind of pesticides to more organic food is causing havoc in the Netherlands as well.
Right. And I just did a story about that, and I worked with the farmers group in the Netherlands. And it's I mean, there is some pollution with farming, but this has to do with climate change. And the Dutch farmers they are a superpower, so to speak, in the agricultural world. They're one of the biggest exporters of agricultural products in a pretty small country. And yet their government is willing to sacrifice all that in the name of climate change. And I should have mentioned earlier that really, if you want to go to the heart of the World Economic Forum, it is climate change. That is the biggest issue to them. And I just want to tell your viewers, get into the science. The climate is changing because we're coming out of an ice age. Okay, but we don't know. We know what the average Earth temperature is, but we don't know what the normal Earth temperature is. It may be cooler or it may be warmer than it is now, but it doesn't mean we need to reorganize our societies and make people suffer to try to fight it.
And Dale, how much would you say that Britain and Europe's energy price crisis is directly linked to the World Economic Forum's push to pursue a zero net energy emissions policy that is actually threatening to bring absolute economic devastation to our country?
I think you can tie it back to it. I also think it may have happened without the World Economic Forum, because this has been a long-term goal of environmentalists, as we all know, to get us off fossil fuels, which, by the way, that's a misnomer. They're hydrocarbons. They're not in limited supply. And Britain, has the energy, the hydrocarbon energy it needs to meet its energy requirements. If we could just break free of this mindset that's gripping our leaders right now. And I guarantee you, if people got more involved in politics, even on the local level, because a lot of these crazy decisions happen on the local level. If good people could get involved in politics and stop some of this, it would make such a difference for all of us.
Absolutely, because the policies our governments are pursuing are absolutely insane. They don't make any logical sense. Yeah, a leader is elected to govern on behalf of the people,
Exactly.
not a very powerful elected elite that their ambition is to destroy our way of life and take total control. But also we know that electorally, that whenever a president or a prime minister pursues these World Economic Forum's policies, it always ends up in electoral disaster. But can you share with us the influence that the World Economic Forum is having on Joe Biden and the policies of the Democrats?
Oh, they're beholden to the World Economic Forum. They even adopted the same phrase for the Biden campaign, which when he ran for president, build back better. We've changed that to build back broke, because they continue to debauch our currency and cause inflation with high government spending. But yeah, it's very interesting the way I'll say leftists, world leaders, and even those in your Conservative Party in Britain have adopted the same mindset, the same approach to reorganizing our economies, sacrificing our energy needs for climate change.
And Dale, how dangerous is it for our liberties, both in the United States and in the UK, when they announce plans to implement a digital currency and a one central bank, which then they'll know our entire finances, and then we're in real danger then. So there won't be any economic freedom, and we can have our bank accounts just cut off because we don't agree with what the government is doing or saying.
It sounds like you saw the headline I saw. Maybe you didn't. In Pakistan this past week, they've gone to a biometric national ID. And Imran Khan supporters have been protesting, and the government said, you better cut it out or we're going to turn off your bank accounts. This was astounding. To me, this is the first time I actually heard a government threaten to do this. Of course, we know they do this kind of thing in China. So I did a story on the European Union's planned digital ID, and one of the persons I interviewed was an engineer with the Digital Privacy Foundation, and she said not only was there no need for it, but it would make identity theft easier, a national digital identity. So yeah, this is. Our government has a lot of bad ideas. Our governments have a lot of bad ideas. And again, good people need to stand up to them.
Absolutely. And finally, Dale, how does the World Economic Forum's Great Reset fit into Bible prophecy?
I don't want to be a party pooper, but I think it's going to be pushed back. But I do think it is a foreshadowing of what will come in the end times. But I think the effects are so damaging that in the next 10 years or sooner, you could see popular revolutions in developed nations. And what will happen is people will see it happen in one country and they'll realize, hey, we don't have to put up with this anymore. But yeah, this gives us a picture, I think, of what we could expect in the end times.
Dale, really appreciate your work. You do excellent news reports from CBN. We really value them on Revelation TV. I very much value them on Behind the Headlines. So keep up the good work and keep fighting for truth, that may the people realise what is actually happening in our nations today if we are to preserve our God-given liberty that He's given us.
Very helpful interview there. Thank you, Simon and Dale, for that. We do have some further interactions. Caroline says that it's the New Zealand evangelist Barry Smith said decades ago that they were going to get rid of small businesses. Is it not a perfect way to close small businesses with high energy costs? These energy costs are by design. And indeed, this is one of the things that we've been discussing. This is all a part of it. Where sales have hastened the cashless situation by using cards for everything, but what can you do when places aren't accepting cash? So it's a difficult one that Susan taps into when she says we are slowly being squeezed down a funnel that will try to make us non-people, only numbers. This is a fulfillment of Revelation, also many science fiction films, which I think there's actually a lot in science fiction, Susan, that in some way points to this dystopian-like future that in one way, because we imagine it to some degree is part of our conscience as something that's going to occur in one form or the other. You can look at Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, George Orwell's 1984, several other books that are out there that show this type dystopia that is engineered. Good evening, gentlemen. It's remarkable to hear your analysis. It's as if you hold political views that are so entrenched that you cannot consider other perspectives. You often refer to the demise of free speech, and yet you never give people of a different perspective a voice. You suggest that the WEF think they know best and want to tell us what to do. Pots and kettles, lads, methinks. Thank you to the anonymous viewer for making it this far in the program and for the interaction. We do try to read any email that comes through, and if you've watched the program before, I've read some emails out that are frankly reprehensible in the statements that they make, and we seek to respond to those and address those. And there are some that are well thought out, but I don't actually see you making any point that has to do with the question this evening. Are you willing to give up ownership of your car or home?
I think you can agree with that.
Yeah.
It probably does.
I don't think you would want to give up ownership of a car or home. I mean, do you think that the WEF is not nefarious in its dealings after the program? Please write in and give us your final thoughts. Brian says, the world's governments are not naive as their leaders always attend the WEF meetings of the IMF, no doubt financed by various nefarious individuals. Of course they're informed, but that's part of what we're discussing here. The WEF involves all of these individuals, all of these.
But we also have to see what happens when you go against their agenda. You only have to look at the absolute hatred that was generated against President Trump when he was offered, when he pulled out of the Paris peace climate and pulled out of the United Nations policies to do climate agreement. Yeah. And the uproar that caused, because he knew that if he followed those agreements, it was the end of the United States as a world superpower, which is exactly what's happened under President Biden. So these policies are not only are dystopian and extremely dangerous, but they threaten everything that we cherish and everything that we value. And what's so sad is that all our leaders, our elected leaders, are just beholden to these people. And that's what is so tragic, that no common sense is coming through. And we are pursuing insane policies that don't actually work based on flimsy scientific evidence. And we are destroying our civilization, we are destroying innovation, we are destroying our freedoms through pursuing this obsession with renewable green energy that doesn't work, that could actually bring us to absolute bankruptcy unless we actually tackle this. So we need bravery on behalf of our next Prime Minister to push back, because that is what the British people want and the people of the world want.
Even respected voices from journalism that are normally listened to and upheld by these powers that be are finding their pleas falling on deaf ears at this point. So in the Wall Street Journal, a very highly regarded U.S. publication, there's a warning that America should not follow Britain's pursuit of net zero emissions policies that are set to be blamed for the energy crisis threatening to bankrupt Britain. And he outlines what's going on and how this policy is what's producing the energy crisis and is what's crippling businesses, crippling families, throwing people into economic turmoil and ruin. Now, as we begin to close the program, all of this we have to view in this perspective. In the last days, there will be times of difficulty, and that the times of difficulty will not only be spiritual, there will be tangible, massive upheaval in the world's political, economic, and various other infrastructures. And there will be times of extreme uncertainty. There will be times of tragedy. And yet we can have the hope that though the Antichrist is coming, yes, the Antichrist coming precedes the coming again of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who the Scriptures promise will crush the serpent under his feet, under the feet of his people. That's our hope. So thank you, Simon, for a great program this evening. I pray for you, our viewers, that you will know peace, that you will not know turmoil in your mind and heart, but that you will know God's rich blessings as you continue to look to Christ through difficulties. Remember to count it all joy when you face trials of various kinds. That's what God calls us to. This is Behind the Headlines. It's been a pleasure to have you join us this evening. Hopefully we'll be back, God willing, next week for another live and interactive version Behind the Headlines. Good night.